My own family called me worthless. They stole everything I had and laughed as they crushed my dreams. But years later, I returned, not as their daughter, but as their worst nightmare, and took everything back. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to our channel and leave your comments. I was 13 years old when my parents first made it clear. I was nothing. I remember the exact words, etched into my memory like a scar. "Maria, you'll never amount to anything. You're worthless. Just look at your sister, she's perfect. She's the future of this family." Her name was Isabella, my younger sister, who somehow floated through life without ever lifting a finger, praised for every laugh, every smile, every tiny achievement. And me? I was the shadow, the servant, the mistake. That night, my father, a man who carried the kind of arrogance only wealth can buy, decided to execute the final blow. He gathered the family, lawyers, and a notary in the estate study, the walls lined with books and portraits of ancestors who seemed to judge me with every glance. "Maria," he began, his voice cold and deliberate. "The inheritance has been settled. Everything goes to Isabella. As for you, nothing." I felt my heart stop. The papers in his hand weren't just documents. They were a tombstone for the life I had imagined. I was 15, and my entire future, the only thing I had dreamed of, was stolen. I tried to speak, to protest, but my mother's sharp laugh silenced me. "You were always a disappointment. Don't even think of asking for anything." That was the last night I stayed in that house as their daughter. I left in the middle of the night. No goodbye, no tears. I packed a small suitcase with clothes, a few cherished books, and the few dollars I had saved from tutoring jobs. I walked out of the mansion and never looked back. The world outside was brutal. I learned to survive in ways a privileged girl from a wealthy family never imagined. I slept in cheap motels, worked in cafes, waited tables, and eventually built myself a life from nothing. But the memory of that betrayal was a fire that never went out. Years passed, and Maria Alvarez, the worthless daughter, became Maria Alvarez, the formidable entrepreneur. I didn't just survive, I flourished. By the time I turned 28, I had founded a tech company that was attracting international investors. I had power, influence, and money, but most importantly, I had a plan. It started with a letter, an envelope thick with legal papers. It arrived at my office, marked urgent. My name, scrawled in my mother's handwriting, made me freeze. My assistant noticed my sudden pallor and asked if I was okay, but I just whispered, "This is from them." The letter contained a shocking revelation. My father, once a powerful businessman, was on the brink of bankruptcy. Every investment he had made had failed. The Alvarez estate, the very place that had condemned me to nothing, was now in jeopardy. I should have felt pity. I didn't. Instead, a plan began to form. Not just any plan, a perfect plan to return and reclaim what was stolen. I would not simply take back the inheritance. I would show them, once and for all, that I was the daughter they had scorned. But now, I was untouchable. I arrived in the city of my birth in a sleek black car, dressed in a designer suit, my hair perfectly styled, lips painted with a confident red. Nobody would recognize the girl who had run away in tears 15 years ago. I had become something else, powerful, untouchable, and dangerous. My first stop was the family law office. I needed every detail about the estate, every loophole, every vulnerability. I watched as my father, now gaunt and bitter, argued with lawyers about debts he could not pay. The once mighty man was reduced to pleading and bargaining, and it felt beautiful. I didn't confront them yet. That would come later. First, I had to prepare. I had to let them believe I was still the timid, worthless girl they had once dismissed. Even as I observed, I felt the old hurt bubble up. My mother, still elegant, still cruel, walked through the mansion with the same haughty posture, laughing at trivial matters. Isabella, my sister, now 23, was married to a wealthy man, flaunting wealth and status as if to mock me. I remembered the countless nights I had cried in my small apartment, imagining this very moment, the moment I returned, not as a shadow, but as a force they could not ignore. I started subtly. Anonymous emails revealing financial irregularities, calls from investors questioning their business practices. I watched as paranoia set in. They had no idea it was me. But the real test came when I walked through the gates of the Alvarez estate under the guise of a business consultant. My face calm, my smile polite, my eyes cold. "Maria, is that really you?" my mother said, her voice betraying a flicker of doubt. "I'm someone helping with your financial troubles," I replied, perfectly calm. The game had begun. I attended the first board meeting of the Alvarez company disguised as a consultant. The room was filled with men in tailored suits, women whispering behind hands, and my father sitting rigid, trying to maintain authority he no longer had. I presented a plan, a flawless strategy to save the company. My advice was praised, my intellect unquestioned. I watched as my father's advisors nodded, impressed by a new talent. Little did they know, the talent was their daughter, the girl they had destroyed. Each move I made was calculated. Each smile, each word, each suggestion designed to tighten the noose. I didn't just want the inheritance, I wanted the humiliation, the shock, the realization that they had underestimated me, that their cruelty had created the very weapon that would destroy them. By the end of the first week, whispers had started. "Who is she? She's brilliant. Where did she come from?" I let them believe it was luck, charm, coincidence. I was patient. Revenge, after all, is an art, not a sprint. One night I wandered into the study, the very room where my father had denied me my inheritance. The room smelled of polished wood, old books, and faint tobacco. I opened a drawer, curious, almost instinctively, and found a stack of letters I had never seen. Letters from my late grandfather, addressed to me. Letters that outlined the estate, my rightful share, and detailed warnings about my father's greed. They had hidden it. They had destroyed my birthright. Anger surged through me, not blind anger, but controlled, deliberate rage. I smiled quietly, almost to myself. "You think you've won? The game isn't even close to over." By the time Isabella realized that something about me was different, it was too late. I had already infiltrated every corner of their financial world, every weak point, every vulnerability. That night, as I walked past the grand hall, I overheard my mother speaking to my father. "Do you think she'll really succeed?" "That girl, she's always been fragile." I paused, letting the words sink in. A fragile girl? That fragile girl was about to take everything they ever stole, and more. The night I had dreamed of for 15 years was only beginning, and the world they knew, the family they thought untouchable, was about to crumble. The next morning, the mansion felt different. I walked through the familiar halls, my heels clicking against marble floors that once echoed with my humiliation. Now every step was mine. Every corner of this house whispered my name. I wasn't the timid, worthless girl anymore. I was Maria Alvarez, the storm that would tear through their lives. I started with Isabella. My sister, blissfully unaware of who I truly was, flaunted her wealth and beauty, believing life was still a playground for her. She invited me, still under my consultant disguise, to a charity gala, a night where the elite flaunted power and money. I accepted, perfectly composed. My hair fell in waves over my shoulders, my dress shimmering under the chandeliers, my red lips a silent warning. People whispered, "Who is she?" "She's stunning, brilliant." Isabella approached me with her usual haughty smile. "I didn't know you'd come tonight," she said, oblivious. "I thought I'd learn from the best," I replied sweetly, my tone dripping with fake admiration. Her eyes narrowed slightly, sensing, though she didn't yet understand, that I was not who I appeared to be. Weeks passed, and my plan unfolded like a chess game. I used my knowledge of the family finances, my company's influence, and my growing insider position in their business. I subtly redirected investors, exposed bad deals, and revealed hidden debts. The Alvarez family, once untouchable, began to crumble. My father's confident facade cracked under the pressure. The man who had laughed at my dreams now pleaded with strangers, begged for advice, and even hinted at selling the estate. I made my move quietly, but with precision. One anonymous tip to a high-profile journalist revealed the financial mismanagement of the Alvarez family business. Within days, headlines screamed, "Alvarez empire on the brink, family wealth in jeopardy." The mansion erupted in chaos. My mother shouted, my father raged. Isabella fainted at the thought of losing her fortune. And I? I watched from the shadows, letting their panic fuel my satisfaction. Finally, the night came when I revealed myself. I arrived at the mansion, not as a consultant, not as a stranger, but as the daughter they had called worthless. "Maria?" My mother's voice trembled as I stepped into the grand hall. I smiled, calmly, deliberately. "Yes, it's me. The girl you laughed at, the one you tried to destroy." Her face drained of color. My father's jaw tightened. Isabella gasped, clutching her pearls. Why are you here?" My father stammered. "To reclaim what is rightfully mine," I said, my eyes cold but unwavering. "You stole my inheritance. You humiliated me, but now it's my turn." I watched the recognition and panic spread across their faces. I presented the documents, letters from my grandfather, proof of the estate's rightful ownership, legal loopholes they had ignored. Every piece of evidence hit them like a hammer. "All these years you thought you had power over me," I said, "but the truth was buried in your greed. I am the Alvarez heir, and I always was." My father tried to interrupt, my mother tried to argue, but I controlled the room. My sister, who had always been the golden child, realized that the life she had taken for granted was slipping through her fingers. I gave them one final moment to plead, but I didn't. Silence reigned, heavy and suffocating, as I walked through the house that had once imprisoned me. The next weeks were the crescendo of my plan. I bought back the family estate through legal channels, secured control of the family business, and ensured Isabella's husband lost his primary investment. I didn't destroy them physically. I destroyed the illusion of their invincibility. Every arrogant glance, every cruel word they had thrown at me now echoed back at them in ruin. My mother, once so proud, had to move into a small apartment, far from the life she had flaunted. My father, humbled, begged for forgiveness, which I granted quietly, because revenge is sweeter when it is measured, not vengeful. Isabella, stripped of privilege, finally understood the price of cruelty. The night I hosted my first gala as the new head of the Alvarez estate, I walked through the grand hall, no longer the timid girl, but a woman in full command. Guests whispered, "She's incredible." "Who is she?" I smiled. I let them think I was born into this world of wealth, oblivious to the blood, tears, and strategy that had built me here. My family? They watched from the back, silent, humbled. And I allowed them that moment to understand everything. I had not just returned. I had conquered. "Maria, we were wrong," my father finally muttered. "Yes," I said, soft but with steel in my voice. "You were wrong. And now I am right where I belong." As the crowd celebrated, I received a message on my phone, an anonymous tip about a hidden account my father had kept, a final secret of wealth, supposedly lost in the past. I smiled to myself, feeling the thrill of control. Even after all they had suffered, there were still surprises, still lessons to be learned. Revenge, I realized, was not about anger. It was about power, precision, and the quiet satisfaction of proving that those who underestimated you were the ones truly powerless. The Alvarez family had taken my youth, my dreams, and my inheritance. But now the balance had shifted. I was not only restored, I was stronger, untouchable, and unstoppable. I stood on the balcony of the estate, looking out over the city lights, feeling the weight of victory and the sweetness of justice. "You thought you could destroy me," I whispered to the wind, "but you only made me stronger. And now, everything is mine." The camera pans out, the mansion glowing in the night, Maria's figure tall and commanding, a perfect symbol of triumph and cunning. The story ends not with hatred, but with empowerment, the ultimate revenge, reclaiming one's life, one's dignity, and one's destiny. If you liked my story, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with as many people as possible. Thanks for watching.